Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Maine Take. My name is Dana Connors, and I'm pleased to be the host of this weekly program brought to you by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. By now, you know that we take a look at the issues, the initiatives, and the ideas at work in our state or our nation, looking and hoping and praying that we improve the lives and the livelihood of our people, as well as address the needs of our economy. And today we have a special guest, and that guest is going to help me look at some of the national issues in which she has played a very vital role in. That person is our first district representative to Congress, Congresswoman Chellie Pingree. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time because there's a lot to talk about. But before we begin with the questions, when I think about your running for this position every 2 years, it began in 2008, your first year was 2009. Sometime I'm going to have you on the show just to reminisce about those 14 years and how things have changed, what your perspective is now compared to then, and all that goes into that history of 14 years. I would say it's going to be pretty impactful. So someday we'll do that.
Thanks. It'll be interesting to look back over that time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot has changed. And one of the things that I want to begin with is to acknowledge that for Maine, you are on two extremely important committees. I'm not going to talk about the number of caucuses because I couldn't remember them all to repeat them, but on appropriations as well as agriculture, two extremely important committees that serve the state of Maine. You've also taken a leadership role on an issue that for the state of Maine speaks to our history, but clearly expresses a critical place in today's economy. And that has to do with our immigrant community, our new Mainers who have come here looking to work. They bring with them skill, experience, and tremendous value, but they're hung up in the process. You have a bill in which you are the key sponsor that looks to address that work authorization period of time. Speak to that. What does it do and where does it stand today?
Sure. I think, most people look, let's start out with saying the immigration process in this country is broken and it's very confusing. And Maine has been fortunate to be able to welcome a lot of new Mainers during different political periods in time. Sometimes it was easy to join our state and other times it's been more complicated. Many of the people who come to Maine are asylum seekers, and that is a process where you come to the country, but you have to go through a process to show why it was important for you to politically or for safety reasons leave the place you were living. We welcome asylum seekers into Maine, but then we have a federal prohibition that says you cannot go to work, even though you're legally here, you're awaiting the process, which can take a very long time, but you're not allowed to go to work for 6 months. During the last administration, they actually lengthened it to an entire year. There was a court case, so now we're back down to 6 months. But even 6 months is a long time. We say, look, these are wonderful, wonderful new Mainers who are coming here. They're anxious to join the workforce. They would do anything to be able to earn a living, support their family. Many of them are highly skilled, but at any skill level, I don't have to tell you, Dana, we are desperately in need of workers in our state. So for a whole variety of reasons, I think this is a ridiculous federal prohibition, and Maine is a good example of where it would make a huge difference.
Oh, by all means, when you think of our workforce challenge, you spoke to that. It's kind of universal throughout our state, regardless of the business or the size. Mm-hmm. And our history is founded on the immigrant influence in our state. We're, in my case, a product of the second generation of Irish who came here years and years ago. But today there is such an opportunity, and you expressed it well, whether it's workforce, whether it's the skill they bring, whether it's our population growth, all weigh into that. So what does yours propose to do? It reduces it. There's a 30-day period, as I understand it. Yeah.
It would just take it down to 30 days. So rather than the 6-month wait, you would automatically, after you're admitted, you're an asylum seeker, you're waiting for the process to continue, you go right to work. You know, there was a we've been struggling with this for a while, and it's beyond me why we can't just move this simple piece of legislation. Some of it is just caught up in the process of reforming immigration. Everything seems to be a sort of political nightmare when you dip your toe in that water. But there was also a notion for a while that somehow people would misuse the system,
Yes.
claim asylum, sneak into the country to get a job. Well, I think if you met any asylum seeker, they would tell you it's a rigorous process. You don't do that just to get a job in America. And frankly, again, if people are here and want to work in our country, being the oldest state in the nation and with economic growth going on in our state, we should be just saying, how soon can we sign you up?
Yeah, that is so true. And I want to get into your fact-finding trip to Romania and Poland, but I also recognize that you just recently had joined with, I believe, 61 other representatives to urge the president to actually expedite as well as to help serve the Ukrainian community who are looking for places to settle beyond Poland into other countries. So,
yeah, many Ukrainians, first off, we're just all horrified by what's going on there. And I think, everyone I meet says, what else could we be doing? How can we help? And clearly we want to be helpful on the military side, but also people are anxious to welcome Ukrainians, into our country. So many Ukrainians have family members here. So for them, it's a logical choice. If you are, if you're staying in Romania or Poland, or maybe you've already gone to Germany or other places in Europe, you want to come to the United States. And many of them are saying, well, let's just make this change. I've been living in a community that's, been decimated. How can I get into the United States? And it's been a very slow immigration process to allow them to come in. The president has said 100,000 people are allowed entry. There's a whole variety of, provisions that they're lifting in the regulations. But the fact is, kind of going back to the broken immigration system, it's slow. And also, there's a lot of confusion because we've had so much tension around immigration. There are some people who have said, well, why lift this regulation for the Ukrainians if you're not lifting it for the people trying to get out of Afghanistan? So justifiable questions. And are we doing enough to support everybody? But when it comes to the Ukrainian crisis, I think it's a good example for people to understand this is what it means to be in a country where your life is in danger and you need to get out. You and your family need to go somewhere safe. And as you said in the beginning, we're a country of immigrants. We welcome others to join us here. My grandfather was an immigrant, and like so many others, I wouldn't have this opportunity if he hadn't made that choice to go to a brand new place. That's how we're all here. And we really need to be doing a better job and doing more of it.
Well, we thank you for putting forward what will really be a success story if this passes, so that we can actually get rid of the negative images that come from those very vital people not working and appearing to be on the system when in fact it's not their fault. They want very much to participate. So that bill should help in many respects address this issue. I want to continue on the path of your fact-finding mission. You joined 5 others. You actually went to Poland, Romania. You saw so much up front and very personal in terms of the horrific impacts that this war is having on Ukraine. You also went to Moldova, and as I understand, which is a country kind of squeezed between the other two, but borders on Ukraine. Share with us what that was like for you, and what did you see that just kind of blew your mind, for lack of a better word, in terms of what those poor people are dealing with?
Yeah, I think we've all been watching it on television virtually every single day, or in the newspaper, and being in that very situation and witnessing families coming across the border all day long. And sometimes you're seeing a vehicle with a family and their kids and a grandparent and, everything jammed into the back of the car, or so many people on foot. And as you see in the pictures, everything you could imagine packing in a bag. If somebody told you, run, go now, and it's full of warm clothes and kids' toys and, basically all you can carry, and having conversations, with people who had to make those immediate decisions or were really running for their lives. And most of them leaving behind a husband, a brother, a male family member, and then just trying to get everybody they could out of the country as fast as possible. I don't think any of us can even imagine how we would deal with that situation. And then to realize that there are, 10 million people, Ukrainian citizens, who are either on the move inside the country or who have crossed the border. The most wonderful thing is being in Poland, Romania, Moldova, or I think throughout Europe. Unlike other times when you have a refugee crisis and big camps are set up and people are sort of on hold, virtually everyone is going to someone's home. I mean, people feel this so personally that, anyone who can is saying, I've got a spare room, I've got a couch, I've got whatever you need, and you're welcome to come here. And much of the population that's on the move is staying in somebody's house somewhere throughout Europe. I mean, some of them had family members, but so much of it is just anyone who can fit someone in. The other thing that you see is these countries have made immediate decisions. I mean, partly because, democracy is on the line. We're fearful of what this crazy human being in Russia will do. Will he move into other countries? And so these European countries that are surrounding the area are just saying, this could be us. So what do we need to do? And, they're making aid available. They're incorporating people in their healthcare system. They're opening up their schools. This is a huge economic burden. I mean, we think that, in the United States, we are challenged by, the cost of immigration. In a little tiny country like Moldova, 2.5 million people, they've already taken in 300,000 refugees across their border, probably more since I was there a couple of weeks ago. 100,000 of them are in their homes. And it's one of the poorest countries in Europe. And, they're just not even questioning it. They're just saying, tell us what to do. And if you think about the proportion of immigrants we've taken into our country, they've got 100,000 and 2.5 million. I can't even do the math off the top of my head. But that is really striking. Just the openness, the welcoming of these neighbors, and just saying, come and tell us what to do. But it's a horrific situation. I've had the chance to meet with some of the parliamentarians that we saw actually who came into Poland to meet with us have already been in Washington subsequently. And it's gut-wrenching to talk to your peers who basically are saying, how much ammunition can you get into the country and how fast can you move it? We need this weapon system. We need every bit of aid you can get, but we really have to win this, and we're intent on winning this. And I think we've all been just amazed at the courage of the Ukrainian soldiers, the country, everyone fighting back. It really does sort of challenge our notion in a sense of, democracy is precious and we take it for granted every day. And look at what people are doing just to say, we want to be a free country and we want to protect that.
Yeah, it is a remarkable story of resilience, resolve. The David Goliath is alive and well when you consider the two countries. It's just simply amazing. Is it as, we're all struck by that resolve, that commitment to democracy. They'll stand up against Goliath. Did you witness that when you were there, that same sense of resolve and commitment and desire and means to win? We just need a little bit of help, but we can do it.
To a person, we met with two prime ministers, both in Moldova and Romania. Like I said, we met with parliamentarians, humanitarian groups, and then just individuals who are crossing the border themselves. And the number of times somebody said to me, we don't want to settle this thing. We're going to win. Now, we all hope there's some kind of settlement so this could just stop, but they are so angry. They're horrified by the ruthlessness of the Russians. And they've they've been fighting hard to become a country that could qualify for joining NATO. They've been fighting hard to have a democracy that functioned. And one of the parliamentarians I met who's worked on the corruption issues for a long time has said, we've done a lot to put our country together to be qualified to join NATO. And now we're being punished because we've done such amazing work, because we've really been trying to fix our judiciary system and just all the things that, go into being a post-Soviet Union, influenced nation. So I think the resolve is phenomenal. And I think it's really, we have high level briefings in Congress. We hear from our, all of our military generals and the secretaries of state. And 201, I think the Republicans and Democrats in that room sit there in kind of amazement that, that we don't hear a backstory that says, well, it's not really that great. I mean, the backstory is this is a tough fight and it's not over, but it's all about how do we do everything we can. And every NATO country, is really working at how do we get them what they need to survive this. And boy, that's a lot of guts.
Yeah, it's a remarkable story in so many ways. And you mentioned in just that comment there about the resolve as well of NATO coming together in support. That too is an incredibly positive story because that's not always been the case. And that united voice means so much. One last thing I want to explore is that you mentioned early on, there's so many people here in the United States and around the world that want to step up and do what they can. From what I read, you ran into an individual from Yarmouth who is a chef by profession, who has certainly done that. Speak to that, because I think that's a fascinating human interest story.
Yeah, that was a wonderful moment. There's a great organization, and some of them some of us have followed them, called World Central Kitchen. Jose Andreas, who's a great restaurateur in Washington, started this organization after being very successful with his restaurants, and just said, I'm going to get out there and feed the world. Sometimes it takes FEMA too long to set up the kitchen. That's what he said to me. Like, we're chefs. We just get in there and we do it. And they really do. And they've been showing up around the world, and no different in Ukraine. They got right over there and set up the kitchen. And then, lo and behold, there's a Yarmouth chef.
Whoops. I think one of us lost the other one. Are you still with us, Congresswoman? Well, wait a second to see if she can.
Showing up. It's called Thoroughfare. It's called Garrison. Over there and was there for 2 weeks, and there he was. Wow. So it was great. I hope my internet isn't going in and out. You might have missed me for a minute.
I did miss you for just a moment. We were talking about, I believe his name was Christian Hayes.
Christian. Yeah.
That's great. No, that's a wonderful story. It is.
And I will tell you, it's like that thing when you're somewhere else and you see a Mainer, and, it's a very emotional experience. We had just come from a train station talking to people, and we get into the kitchen and, there he is stirring a big pot, and, we just gave each other a giant hug. And I think we were both crying. It was just like, oh my God, how does this happen in the world? But what a wonderful, wonderful person. I also ran into a photographer from Waterville at one of the border crossings. Mainers are everywhere.
They are, and in situations like this, it's the best of the best that comes forward, and it's just, in that respect, there's nothing but good things to say about it. And we were glad you had the experience, and we're glad you're back home safe and sound. I do want to have you speak about yesterday. You had the U.S. Educational Secretary come to the state of Maine, Miguel Cardona, and you had the opportunity to tour with him as you talked about something that I'll bet not many previous secretaries of education did speak to as a priority, and that was the role of the bus driver and the difficulty in meeting the demand. But also you, from what I read, visited York County Community College. So share with us what that experience was like.
Sure. Well, first it was it was an honor to have the secretary come to Maine, and we're always so proud to show off, the things that we've done well in our state. And we visited RSU 21, I guess, Kennebunk schools, and really just sat in a parking lot in the bus lot with some bus drivers. And he just wanted to sit there and talk to them about the challenges that districts all over the country are having enough people to drive the buses, and what's working, what isn't, how can Washington be more helpful. And one thing that's great about him, he was an elementary school teacher, he was a principal. He knows what it is to both ride the bus as a kid, but also to deal with bus drivers, getting kids to his own schools. And it was a great conversation. And frankly, it reminded all of us, these are the people who see your kid first every day, the ones who know more about what's going on in a kid's life often than the teacher or the other administrators in the school, who during the pandemic, had to have seating arrangements and, cleaning the buses and kids wearing masks and even delivering meals at times when schools weren't functioning. So that was a really helpful experience also for him to hear, what's challenging in licensing bus drivers. How could the federal government be more helpful? And then we had a chance to visit York County Community College. And one of the great things there, because he's very dedicated to, getting our kids in the workplace, making sure there are lots of opportunities for young people. They have a very good program of getting kids into entry-level jobs, medical assistants, other things, so they can go right to work, have that salary coming in, but then work their way into a nursing degree or another advanced degree in, whether you're planning to be a machinist or you're planning to work, in healthcare or technical work, technology. They just have some great programs, law enforcement. And I think he was really impressed with the students. We did a roundtable with them. And, I was proud because I know, going back to the state legislature, how hard Maine has struggled to make sure that we have training opportunities for all kids, that, advancement into college, dealing with the cost of going to college. So many things are encompassed in the programs that are going on in our community colleges today. I felt like I was getting to watch the evolution of a challenge we've witnessed for so many years, but really, because the business community are partnering with our community colleges, and because our community colleges are really trying to think about how do we do this going into the future and make it work for everybody. It was a great visit, and I know he was very impressed with the work we're doing.
That's great. That is very, very helpful in terms of both of those issues. The bus driver, it kind of reflects the workforce. So, how many times would you think, or how often would you think that the workforce challenge would reach into that area of need? But you can find it throughout our state. So having him here and that issue, but also the good work that higher ed is doing, community colleges, university system, career technical education, they are working together today like they've never done before. And boy, that is so vital to meeting the needs of today. So it's great.
Dana, I think you should take some credit for that, because I really do think that the chamber businesses, have really understood, like, we have a need for the people who can come and fill our jobs. And we can't just say, like, hey, that's somebody else's problem, how do we fix it? And I think there really has been a unique partnership in Maine that's gotten just, better and better over the years, of saying, we need more, people to do this work, whether it's healthcare or education or, all the fields that are, really hurting for workers, but making sure that those opportunities are there. It's really been an evolution. I know you've been working at this for years, so good work. He was impressed.
Thank you. That's great. Actually, you've been very, very liberal with your time, and I greatly appreciate it, but I can't let you go until I acknowledge a couple of things that are very important to our state. One is that I noted that you are part of a caucus that's in support of our 4 U.S. public shipyards, and obviously that's a key element of our economy and part of our heritage industry, if you will. I want to note that because that's to be appreciated. The other is that, every day we tend to read, maybe not every day, but often, about more recent release of funds that we've received as a result of our 4 members of Maine's delegation working with others to come up with the funding that it's been so important to us. And I read the Restaurant and Small Business Revitalization Fund. That was like 55 billion, I recall. And then for the country, and then there was 47.5 for public transportation. I just want to take this time, whether it's the shipbuilding, whether it's the vital presence of restaurants and small businesses or transportation, hats off to you. We really appreciate the good work on behalf of our state. That's important to say, particularly at a time like this, when it's easy to focus on the problems and the issues that stand in the way. But those actions really did matter, and they really make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that. I'm very privileged to have a chance to work on these issues and really to work with, so many great Mainers who let us know where the needs are, and a delegation that works well together to make sure we get that funding back here in Maine. So
Boy,
it's my
that
good
is
fortune.
Yeah, and I thank you. I mean, there's a lot that Maine needs to be thankful for, but certainly one of those most pressing is how well the four of you work together on behalf of all of us. That is to be noted, and for that we are very grateful.
Well,
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. I've taken liberty and probably taken some advantage, but it's great having you on the program today.
Great. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to work with you and to see you on the show. So thanks for including me. Nice to talk to you.
Same here. Take care.
Take care.
Well, that's at our national level. Let's turn now to Maine. And if my math is correctly, and even I can figure this one out, 4 days left this week, counting today, and 3 next week before the scheduled adjournment takes place. With me today to discuss that, what's ahead and what's the process going to be like as we finish up this shorter session, so-called short on time, but not short on issues, is our Executive Vice President, Peter Gore, who oversees our advocacy team. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Dana.
And you just got back from the legislature where you're following a very important issue. What's the mood like there, and what's happening today?
It's typical end of a session, whether it's a long session or a short session. They all sometimes, they have certain traits and qualities. So, for instance, the building's packed today. There was a lot of people there. You have a lot of, there's a lot of sentiments. So people come to those sentiments. There are honors that legislators put in for constituents that they have today. There's been a lot of basketball teams up there today, for instance, because they just finished the high school basketball tournaments. And there are other groups too. There's a lot of advocacy going on from the grassroots, so the hallways loaded with people. So it's just a very busy atmosphere. The legislature was a little late going in, as has been their case. The Senate was just going in as I was leaving. They're planning to work at least through the early afternoon, then break and come back. The Senate will work, they said, until sometime between 1 and 3 today, break and then come back. If they want to get done a week from tomorrow, they've got a lot of paper they have to move.
Boy, you said that well. I read something today in one of the media that said there's like 436 bills, of which 200 have been enacted, but they sit on the table waiting for funding. Well, that leaves a little over 200, 236 thereabouts, and for which there's a lot of big, important, impactful bills. You're following one that I'd love to have you give an update to those who are watching us today because of its importance and because of the impact it has on how many of us do business.
Sure, that would be probably 1945, the biometrics bill.
That's exactly, yeah.
Biometrics are ubiquitous in our lives. We may not always realize it. When you open your phone and you have facial recognition, when you're using an application where you have a password or an option for a fingerprint, that's biometrics. There's other uses for it as well. And people are concerned about both privacy and the protection of your biometric information. And biometrics are used in other areas. For instance, when they do clinical trials on drugs, that all has to be kept, obviously, because people need to track the success of those trials. Well, the bill the purpose of 1945 is ostensibly to protect people's biometric information. The problem is the bill is drafted has its own set of built-in flaws to it. And it's modeled after a bill that was passed a while ago in 2008 in Illinois. And it's been nothing but a disaster for the state of Illinois businesses in particular, because, instead of protecting, because the bill goes so far, instead of protecting people's biometric information, and some of that protections include a private right of action. Biometrics has disappeared in Illinois. For instance, even we were told that even Subaru, the voice recognition technology in a Subaru sold in Illinois is not the same as the others that are sold in 49 other states. And so this bill goes too far. But the problem is, from a procedural standpoint, they're talking about enacting this law, delaying the implementation date till January of 2024, and then creating a study group to come back and fix all its problems next session. We think that's no way to legislate public policy. The real way to do this is to study the issue and decide what, if anything, needs to be done, and then create a law that works for everybody, protects people's biometric information, but at the same time, will make sure that those protections of biometrics, gives us all, don't go away here in Maine. So there's a majority report that does just a study. There's a minority report that implements the law and then studies it. And then there's just an ought not to pass. And there's a lot of lobbying going on around this issue. It's very important for businesses. Make no mistake, people think that small businesses haven't gotten caught up in this. That's not true. In Illinois, they have been the victims of private rights of action and class action lawsuits as well. So that's the big one that we're watching right now.
Yeah, an important one, as you said, for all the reasons you stated. But there's a lot of other bills too, and we don't have time to discuss them, but we certainly will as we take a look back when we have our program next week to some of the results, because some of these are yet to be defined. You've got the sovereignty bill of tribes. You've got the PFAS issue, which is
that's a big issue. That's a big issue.
You've got the housing that's yet to be done, really worked on. You've got
sports betting.
Yeah. The accountability bill that the governor put in to address the concerns with power companies, CMP, Versant, that seems to be working its way through. You've got a spaceport, which that's been actually enacted, I believe, and that one will open the door to entrepreneurship, research around those smaller satellites that probably its home base will be in your territory of Brunswick.
That's right.
But also has presence in Loring and along the down east coast. And the issue that resource Lewiston that's had a very important role to play. So when you think about it, each and every one of those have a presence in these next few days. And probably, as you and I have seen over the years, a lot of them will wait to those last couple of days in which the midnight oil will be burned forever and more, and everybody would be happy to get out of there. But what's your reaction to what I just said?
I think that's all true, and we didn't even really touch on the budget. You have a supplemental budget that's out there looming, and according to the story I just read in our clips today, and it matches what you hear on the third floor, the Appropriations Committee is making progress with the governor's budget proposal. Obviously, the large surplus, the governor is proposing, and there's significant Republican support to give most of it back to the taxpayers in the form of $850 refunds. And then you have some other programs, community college, some of these other things that would be funded under the governor's bill. And it leaves the various caucuses, the four caucuses, with about $20 million on the table, split four ways, $5 million apiece, to fund, sort of pet bills that legislators have. And, I asked around today about, for instance, what might, the Democrat caucuses be looking for, and no one really knows. They are, for instance, talking about providing additional funding to nursing homes. That will probably be a priority for certain legislators. But beyond that, no one could really articulate, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And as you've already pointed out, there are literally hundreds of bills on the table poised for enactment that all require, a price tag. And there's nowhere near enough money of 20 million. Even if one group had all $20 million to spend, it wouldn't, that's a drop in the bucket of what the totality of the bills would actually cost. So that will be a big part of what happens between now. I suspect most of that will be solved over the weekend, Dana, because as you know, the budget never seems to close when they're around. It's always a Saturday or a Sunday at 2 or 3 in the morning.
2 or 3 in the morning, right?
Yeah, exactly. I suspect that same thing will happen. And so, and hopefully it will, because they need to come back on Monday. They need to have time to caucus the budget. They need to have time to go through the bills that they've decided to fund, kill the ones they're not going to fund, and still plan to get out of here by the 20th.
Wow. Well, thanks, Pete. We have run out of time, which is not surprising. There's a lot to talk about, but we'll do that next week when all 3 of you will be on the program to kind of do a wrap up. And we hope, in fact, it'll be almost over. If not, we can see the end from where we sat. So thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Yep. Well, here we go with the takeaway for this week. And I confess, this is always spontaneous and reflection on what we've just heard. And I'm very pleased with the program today, but the way that I probably would use it is maybe it's out of reflection and reaction to the 2 years that we've been in. But I would use the phrase that I think I've had attributed to Yogi Berra, which says it's not over until it's over. And again, maybe that's reaction to the pandemic of 2 years, hoping that it is nearly over, or maybe it's the 2 years of challenge that we've experienced. That too, many of us wish it was over and we were looking at it in the rearview mirror. Because the program this week reminds us of the issues, the challenges facing our decision makers in our nation's capital, but also here in the state of Maine. And how the last 2 years of the pandemic have tested our strength as a state or as a nation. It's brought us face to face with our own resolve and resiliency here as well as in our country. It's also reminded us that more than ever, issues are tough, they're complicated, they're controversial. And that has especially been the case during the pandemic. It's been exacerbated. There were issues before, made worse by time. But it should also be a reminder, more than anything else, that we're in this together. We depend on one another to listen, to learn, most of all, to work together. And we also know intuitively, by experience or otherwise, that success becomes ours when we realize the validity of those words and put them to practice. But success also depends on putting our people and our policy over politics when decisions are made. When you talk about dealing with economic needs, it is intended to unite us, not divide us. So the question is, when you think of all of that, how are we doing? Well, I think your opinion is as good as mine, if not better. But I would find the whole issue is like a two-sided coin. We know there's divisiveness. It's not to be denied. We know that there's political agendas. They are very evident and they're hard to miss in today. But we've also learned that in these 2 years, when the chips were down and we needed help, good can happen. The relief package that we've all experienced came out of Washington to our state, our people, our businesses, our economy was not only welcome, they were needed for survival in many cases. And the state, in turn, has used these dollars wisely to help our state address those very same issues of people, of businesses, of the economy, and put us on the path to recovery in many instances. So I guess as I close the takeaway for this week, I would land on the following comment, that in spite of all the noise, the news, and the negativity, there are much that we can find to be thankful for. When the session's over and we look back on the 130th here in our state or the 117th session of Congress, I do believe that in spite of the division, in spite of the politics, it is extremely important that we do find the good, that we do what Alex Haley said in his book titled The Roots, that we find the good and praise it. And for that, let's be thankful. Let's find those things for what we have done, for what's been achieved, not what didn't happen, or worse yet, the impact that some may have had to experience. Let's find the good and praise it. Let's work with those who need the help. And you know, when I think about the people serving us, whether in the state legislature or at the national level, we need to be thankful that they're willing to do it. These are tough times. These are stressful times. The issues are tough. And the fact that they're willing to take the time to represent us, even though we may not agree in everything that gets said, they are there to listen to us and to try to serve us to the very best of their ability. We thank them for that. And for that, we're grateful. It is over, at least my message for today. Thank you very much for being with us. I thank both Congresswoman Pingree and Peter to join us to bring us up to date on what's happening in our nation, as well as here in the state of Maine. And as I always say when we close out the show, in a world where you can be anything, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another. Stay safe, be strong. See you back here next week on Tuesday, the Maine Take. Take care.